In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro received OPEC Secretary General Mohammad Barkindo during an official visit to the country. At least 11 people died and 31 others were rescued after a boat capsized with an unknown number of passengers off the coast of Puerto Rico. Somalia is set to hold its long-delayed presidential vote on Sunday, ending the convoluted electoral process that raised tensions in the country when the president's term expired last year without a successor in place. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Dio Martin, from the TeleSUR studios in Havana. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro received OPEC Secretary General Mohammad Barkindo during an official visit to the country. From the Miraflores Palace in the capital city of Caracas, the dignitaries reaffirmed the ties of integration and cooperation as precepts of the relations between the nation and the multilateral organization that was born 61 years ago by Venezuelan initiative. In this regard, Barkindo highlighted the leadership of the South American nation while thanking it for its perseverance in keeping OPEC active. During the meeting, Barkindo and President Maduro urged the countries of the world to depoliticize the oil.
I would like to take this opportunity to respectfully call the leaders to respect the basic principles of OPEC. First, that oil can never be or must be politicized. That oil must be depoliticized. Oil cannot be used as a weapon of policy or sanction.
In this context, President Nicolas Maduro agreed with the Secretary General of OPEC in the rejection of the use of energy resources as a weapon of manipulation to settle disputes of any kind between nations.
We had a hard blow, a hard fall, the persecution of oil. Barkindo saying, and we share oil, gas. The main energy companies in the world must get out of any political dispute, any geopolitical dispute, any ideological dispute, of any kind of sanctions. We are already seeing the so-called sanctions against Russian oil and gas, and the boomerang effect on the economy and quality of life of the United States, Europe, and the world.
The President of the Republic of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, declared an official mourning decreed by 6 a.m. on May 13th until 12 midnight on May 14th. Flag hoisted at half-mast in public buildings and military institutions. The official mourning was declared on Thursday after the unfortunate accident that occurred last May 6th at the emblematic Saratoga Hotel in the island's capital. On the afternoon of May 12th, the body of the last person missing as a result of the accident was found, allegedly the chambermaid of the tourist resort. The death toll resulting is 45 people, 44 Cubans, and 1 Spanish citizen. Regarding the decree of the official mourning, on his official Twitter account, President Miguel Díaz-Canel expressed that he shared the grief of the Cuban people for the loss of lives in the Saratoga Hotel accident. Also, the executive thanked the firefighters, rescuers, health personnel, and the citizens who collaborated in several ways during the rescue operations. On behalf of the Cuban government, he offered his condolences to the families and friends of the victims of the accident. Local authorities are already attending to the neighbors whose homes were affected by the explosion, as well as the elementary school next to the hotel. The decree of official mourning comes after firefighters confirmed the discovery of the lost body identified as missing after the accident.
We found the woman employee that was practically under the rubble. It was a very risky job in which the rescuers and the Red Cross also participated. It was a joint work. At the moment, we can already say that out of the previous statistics we had, that is to say the 45 people, we could recover the last bodies. And well, as fire department, we will continue here with our actions. And as I mentioned in previous interviews, taking into account the investment process that will be carried out in the hotel and some reconstruction and repair work that will also be performed, we will also be here taking part of this remodeling job.
On Wednesday, Antigua and Barbuda's Minister of Communications, Melford Nicholas, stated the Prime Minister's refusal to attend the Summit of the Americas if Cuba, Venezuela, or Nicaragua are excluded.
At lunch yesterday, the Prime Minister had stepped out of cabinet for a brief moment with consultation with another Caribbean head. And upon his return, he detailed the cabinet as to the position. You would note that there are a number of other Latin American countries that have expressed a similar concern that we have expressed here from Antigua. This is supposed to be a meeting of state heads, and I believe that the position that we discussed yesterday and that was agreed upon is that the Prime Minister will not attend the meetings if Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua are going to be excluded. That is the precondition.
Colombia's presidential candidate Gustavo Petro defended Daniel Quintero, mayor of Medellin, who is temporarily suspended from his post for allegedly intervening in the presidential election campaign during a rally in Fusagasugá, south of Bogotá.
An official who is not a criminal judge cannot violate political rights, which are fundamental rights of the citizens, because they have the right to elect, not violate political rights of the elected. Margarita Cabello, Attorney General of the nation, decided to remove the popularly elected mayor from the mayor's office of Medellin.
In Ecuador, the hunger strike of 30 teachers to demand a salary increase and reforms to the education law is in its 11th day. On Thursday, the teachers on voluntary fasting will go to the Constitutional Court that will debate the executive's veto on education law reforms that would set the salaries of teachers at the same level of other public employees in the country. Meanwhile, another group of teachers will mobilize to support the hunger strike carried out by their colleagues. The teachers say that if the response of the Constitutional Court is not favorable, they will promote protests in several regions of the country with the support of several social sectors.
We say to the government, down with its neoliberal policies. We tell them that there must be investment in the social sectors, if not to step aside because the Ecuadorian people will unite and put aside these measures that really keep the Ecuadorian people in misery. Here we are demonstrating that there is money not only for education, but also for health, for social security, and for the popular sectors.
In Brazil, the new Minister of Mines and Energy, Adolfo Sachida, requested studies on the legislative changes needed to privatize the state-owned companies Petrobras and Presal Petróleo S.A. Sachida expressed his desire to have the evaluation as soon as possible so that it can be evaluated by President Jair Bolsonaro. The announcement comes in the midst of the internal crisis in the Brazilian executive due to the increase in fuel and inflation in the middle of election year. The announcement comes after Bolsonaro fired General Joaquim Silva Luna as president of Petrobras in less than 2 months and dismissed the Minister of Mines and Energy, Admiral Bento Albuquerque. The Peruvian Prime Minister Aníbal Torres appeared before the Congress together with 2 other ministers of Pedro Castillo's cabinet to respond to the curfew during the social protest against the president. A session aimed at determining the reasons for the curfew imposed by the government on April 5th amid social protests is in this regard. Torres emphasized that the declaration of emergency and curfew in Lima and Callao last April 5th was based on the need to allow the armed forces to collaborate with the police in maintaining public security. This Thursday, the so-called Piquetera March arrived in the capital of Argentina to demand better salaries and social benefits from the government of President Alberto Fernandez. The march that began 3 days ago in different parts of the country with the slogan "For Work, for Wages, Against Hunger and Poverty" reached Plaza de Mayo. The demonstrators also gathered at the Pueyrredón Bridge in order to hold a closing ceremony in the vicinity of the Casa Rosada at 3 p.m. local time. We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. And welcome back to From the South. At least 11 people died and 31 were rescued after a boat capsized with an unknown number of passengers off the coast of Puerto Rico. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, the rescue operation in the area of the shipwreck, some 18 kilometers north of the Puerto Rican island of Desecheo, continues with helicopters and patrol vessels. A border police helicopter reported the shipwreck after spotting a group of people in the water and an overturned boat north of Desecheo, located between the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. Greece is extending a bilateral military agreement with the United States for 5 more years. The agreement, to be ratified by Parliament on Thursday, will grant the United States military continued access to 3 bases in mainland Greece, together with its long-standing naval presence on the island of Crete. Speaking in Parliament, Greek Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias said the alliances were key to the country's defense strategy. Thousands of people rallied in Croatia against the neglect of women's health on Thursday, prompted by the case of a woman who was denied an abortion although her fetus had serious health issues. Mirela Cavada's unborn child was diagnosed with an aggressive brain tumor in late April in the 6th month of her pregnancy. 4 public hospitals in Zagreb refused to terminate her pregnancy without explanation or saying they could not confirm the diagnosis or lack the necessary conditions. The demonstrations, dubbed Enough, were held a day after a medical commission eventually allowed her the procedure amid nationwide outrage over the case.
The situation currently faced by pregnant woman Mirela, who was suggested to go to another country since no one wants to terminate her pregnancy in Croatia, really show that our republic system, as far as it concerns women's health, has collapsed completely.
On a similar topic, on Thursday, several people demonstrated in the streets of the Canadian capital, Ottawa, for the March for Life, or an anti-abortion rally at a time when in the United States this right is threatened by an upcoming Supreme Court draft. The March for Life anti-abortion march has been held in the Canadian capital for the last 25 years on the anniversary of the day of the Omnibus Bill C-150 was passed in Canada in 1969, decriminalizing contraception and allowing abortion in circumstances. In Canada, as in the United States, the right to abortion is not protected by law, but by jurisprudence following the Morgenthaler judgment of January 1988. On Thursday, hundreds of United States health professionals gathered in Washington to demand better working conditions in the context of the International Nurses' Day. Crowds of nurses gathered at the Washington Monument holding signs reading "Safe Staffing Saves Lives." Protesters claimed they are overworked and underpaid. During the pandemic, many nurses died and others stepped away. Nurses intend the government to increase wages, improve staffing levels, prevent violence against healthcare workers, and fight discrimination. The demonstration ran peacefully with music and rejoice, as well as a wonderful memorial for those who departed due to COVID-19.
Our main goal is to try and to advocate for the patient-nurse ratio. Yes. You know, that's a really big, huge effect on us when you're working in a facility and there's one nurse to 24 patients that are 20 of them are on vents. And it's very stressful, and we just want to be that advocate for the patient care to make sure that these patients are getting the best treatment that they can.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa on Thursday appointed leader of the United National Party, Ranil Wickremesinghe, as Prime Minister. Wickremesinghe was sworn in as the Prime Minister in Gotabaya Rajapaksa in Colombo. However, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa's resignation has failed to pacify public anger. Sri Lanka plunged into weeks of economic crisis stemming from a foreign exchange shortage, which has led to a shortage in essential supplies such as fuel, food, and medicines. The country has no government since Monday, and the opposition stated it will not work with the current president. Pakistani police reports 1 person dead and 13 injured after a roadside bomb targeted Thursday a van carrying Pakistani security forces in the southern port city of Karachi. Sindh Police's Deputy Inspector General Sharjeel Karal said the explosives had been planted on a bicycle. The police official told reporters that there was no evidence of any particular institution being targeted with this action. No one has yet claimed responsibility for the bombing, but Karachi has witnessed several militant attacks in recent years. We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi and welcome back. Somalia is set to hold its long-delayed presidential vote on Sunday, ending the convoluted electoral process that raised tensions in the country when the president's term expired last year without a successor in place. Authorities have registered 39 presidential candidates, a list that includes incumbent Mohammad Mohammad, two former presidents, a former prime minister, several top officials, and even a journalist. The vote will take place amid heightened insecurity as the Islamic extremist group Al-Shabaab, which opposes the federal government, continues to stage lethal attacks in the capital and elsewhere in the Horn of the African nation. On Thursday, hundreds of protesters gathered in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, to ask the military return to their barracks and allow the establishment of a civil state. Protesters walked towards the presidential palace, responding to a call by various resistance groups. The latest demonstration is another in a long string of protests following the October military coup, which derailed the country's transition to democratic rule. Footage from Thursday's protest showed riot police firing tear gas at protesters, while confrontations took place between the security and protesters. The Sahel region is experiencing its worst drought in over a decade, plunging more than 10.5 million people to malnutrition. For Burkina Faso, the situation is particularly worrying as the country suffers the consequences of the conflict, which is exacerbating the ongoing food crisis. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, the violence has resulted in the internal displacement of more than 1.8 million people, or nearly 10% of the country's population. With 80% of the population relying on agriculture, the displaced immediately become more vulnerable, depending on aid to survive. The president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, warned that the West is willing to sacrifice the rest of the world for its ambition of global domination. At a meeting with members of the government on economic issues, Putin pointed out that several countries are already facing threats of starvation. In this context, the dignitary indicated that if the imposition of sanctions against the Russian nation continues to spread, the European Union could also face consequences that will be difficult to reverse. Putin referred to the fact that the blame for the situation lies entirely and completely with the ruling elites of Western countries who, in order to preserve their global dominance, are willing to sacrifice the rest of the world.
We are building this work taking into account difficult external conditions. I mean both the difficult global situation and the sanctions pressure from the Western states.
Russian President Vladimir Putin also said that Western sanctions imposed on Russia also affect Europe.
It is obvious that due to objective economic laws, the continuation of the obsession with sanctions will inevitably lead to the most complex, difficult to reverse consequences for the European Union and for its citizens.
6 people have died and 350,000 have been treated for a fever that has spread rapidly across North Korea, a day after acknowledging a COVID-19 outbreak for the first time in the pandemic. The North's official, the Korean Central News Agency, said of the 350,000 people who developed fevers since last April, more than 160,000 have recovered. It said 18,000 people were newly found with fever symptoms on Thursday alone, and more than 180,000 are being isolated for treatment. The agency also reported one of the 6 people who died was confirmed infected with the Omicron variant. North Korea imposed a nationwide lockdown on Thursday after acknowledging its first COVID-19 cases. North Korean President Kim Jong-un visited the Antivirus Command Center to check the situation and responses after declaring a state of emergency and ordering a national lockdown. The North Korean's official central news agency showed the head of state wearing a mask in a lobby and rooms of the iconic Koryo Hotel in downtown Pyongyang. This was the first time Kim Jong-un wore a mask in public, likely for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. North Korea was the first country worldwide to close its borders against COVID on January 2020. With that, we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I am Dio Martin. Thank you for watching.